Welcome to the Tattoo Teacher Podcast, where we get to know the person behind the professional, going below the surface of what we see. Join me as I talk with some incredible individuals from around Australia and the world. I hope you enjoy this great conversation that I had recently with Aaron Patching. Well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever time of day it is that you happen to be listening to this. Welcome to the Tattoo Teacher Podcast. On today's episode, I have the amazing Aaron Patching. Now, Aaron has a number of strings to his bow. First being he is the co-owner and educational specialist for the Inventor Club, which I'm sure we're going to get into later. He is the strategic AI lead for River Learning Trust. He's a lead practitioner in digital learning. He's a self-confessed problem solver and most recently a podcast host. So Aaron, welcome to the Tattoo Teacher Podcast.
Oh, I'm so sorry. It literally cut out on me there. I was loving that intro. I think I caught like just the back end and I think I've missed my cue to cut in there. But thank you so much, Phil. Thanks for having me. Genuinely really pleased to be here.
Oh, mate, no dramas at all. You got to love technology. I'm on the Gold Coast. You're in the Cotswolds, am I correct?
Yeah, just outside. So just in sunny Swindon, of all places.
So you wouldn't be far from Jeremy Clarkson's.
Yeah, so he's over this way, Oxfordshire, I believe, over that kind of way. He's not far. He's about 40-minute drive from us. We've been thinking about going down, actually, but we just haven't been over that way. Like I said, we've got sunny, glorious Wiltshire to explore around here.
Well, enjoy your summer break, young sir. Enjoy your summer break. I just want to thank you for joining me tonight. And look, we're just going to get straight into it. And my first question, if you've listened to the podcast, you'll probably know what it is. But my first question is, what is your why? Why do you do all these things that you're doing?
It's a good question. I suppose the first and main reason is I enjoy it. I've always been someone who's kept busy. And like I said, those sort of strings kept getting added as I went along. The reason I went into teaching is I used to be an outdoor instructor for a long time. So I didn't go to university until I was about 24 to get into teaching. So since I left school, I've done it for a number of years, working for sort of the PGLs and Kingswoods of the world. And then I started working for myself and it was great. I really enjoyed it because it was that sort of facilitation side. So it was all about problem solving and team building. And then you were doing rock climbing and archery, bushcraft, all these really cool stuff, which I really, really enjoyed. But then what would happen is they would drive up on Monday, get off the coach, have this fantastic week. You'd get to know the kids, really see them grow and develop. And teachers would tell you that the naughty kid was doing great and that the smart kids were coming out the shell and all this stuff. And it was amazing. And then you get to Friday, they'd jump back on the coach, off they go. And then on Monday, new coach would come and then you would do it all again. So we'd have this great week. But for me, after about 6 years, it was becoming a little bit sort of Groundhog Day. And so I wanted to see that same kind of development, but just over a longer period of time. And then it just clicked that I was like, right, actually teaching, why not? That sounds like the same sort of thing, but actually I get to see them over across the whole year, across the whole 5 years, see them through into GCSE and so on. So that seemed like a good idea. And then that was it. That was the only reason I went to university was to teach. And yeah, it literally was everything that I thought it would be of seeing that development, getting to really impact on those lives and so on and do that in a different setting. And I suppose that's where I've brought that outdoor facilitator side into my teaching as well, which has always been quite a major influence through it. And then I just really enjoy also coaching and teaching adults. So the CPD stuff we do through Inventor Club, it's something we really enjoy. Myself and Ben, we love going out into schools, actually getting in front of people and sort of, I suppose, not preaching, but like I said, just showing a different way of how you can go about your lessons and being a little bit more creative in doing that.
That sounds That sounds like a lot of fun. Like, I mean, I've been on plenty of school camps and been to the outdoor ed stuff, and yeah, like the trainers and the coaches and these the mountaineers and everyone, like they've got it tough. Like you've got to try and capture these young minds, and sometimes pretty bad attitudes pretty quickly. So that's a definite skill, and you wanted to go into the classroom and deal with that full time, not just ditch them after a week. So hats off to you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just one of those. It seemed like a natural progression at the time because you were doing an element of teaching and coaching and facilitating within that. And then to do that more full time and to see those same kids and really work on that progress, like I said, and bring up. So we worked with what we would call NEAT students, or we did at least back then, which is not in education, training or work. No, that's what they call them now, newts. And so these were kids that were sort of disaffected. They dropped out, and they were some of the best weeks because they just had this disillusionment of what it was they wanted to do and so on. And it weren't so much that they were naughty. They just didn't quite know what they were doing. So you were in this space of facilitating, mentoring and guiding them along. And I think we lose some of that in teaching sometimes because of what's going on, of how much there is. And if you boil it down to a lot of it, you are a role model for a lot of these kids, and you're there for a big chunk of their formidable years, particularly at secondary. To keep that there and have that as part of my practice is something that I really enjoy doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, look, I've been teaching just over 20 years now, and look, I've got a soft spot for the disenfranchised, the kids who are pushing boundaries. And look, there's always a reason. Sometimes they just need to. They're just trying to work out who they are. Other times, school's the only safe place where they can actually um, explore who they are in a safe environment. So it's one of those things where, yeah, I absolutely agree and feel that passion for those kids, where you can get around them and instill that little bit of self-confidence. And I guess as an outdoor educational trainer, I mean, stepping backwards off a cliff is not easy. And some of these kids, with as much bravado as they have, when it gets down to it, they're still, they've still got the same fears that each and every one of us have.
Absolutely. And it's all about sort of that comfort zone and where they do it in what they display in different scenarios. So, like I said, a classroom is a different scenario where actually they're not feeling as confident. They're not in their comfort zone because they're not feel like they've got the brains or they've not got the knowledge to shine in that area. But actually, socially outside of that, they're bigger, larger than life because they're more in their comfort zone. And so they have this ability to experiment a little bit more. They feel a bit safer, they're a bit more secure in how they're behaving. And it's the same for school. Like I said, a lot of kids, that's where they're comfortable, that's where they're happy and they feel safe and secure to do that, and other times they don't, and that's where you'll see sort of certain behaviors, and that's where school is very different, because you're looking after 1,000 kids rather than, say, in the outdoor world where you'd have 50 kids. So there are different sort of systems and structures in place to help that and keep everyone sort of safe and included. And I think that's where, like I said, you can struggle. There's some things you would like to do personally and have and work your way, but you're working within a system of 1,000 other students that also need that kind of structure and security. So I think that's where we see a lot of the challenges and people unhappy with the system. But a lot of the time it's necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. And the system, I've talked a lot about the system lately, and I have to be well aware because I work within that. But what I found is that and some of the discussions that I'm having is the system it's got nothing to do with schools, and it's got nothing to do with the teachers. It's got to do with so many outside forces that we have no control over. Yet we're trying to raise these, or help raise these young men and women to be great members of society. Yet they're being pushed and pulled, we're being pushed and pulled, and yeah, I guess it makes it a little bit tricky.
Yeah, it makes it really tricky. And I suppose I've been having a lot more conversations, like you said, about this, about what the system is. And so, because I know how I would like to teach, how I'd like to go about things. And I look at that from my point of view as a teacher. And then I've got above me, I've got my head of department. They want the way their department to work. Above them is an assistant head, and they've got how their strategic area would like to go. Then you've got the head teacher who wants how the school to go, but then they're accountable to exam boards. They're accountable to results, to Ofsted, to the DFE. And so there's always constantly another level that people are looking towards that have got their own focus, their own area, their own guidance on it and everything else. And it's sort of been that way for a very long time. So I was talking to the exam board AQA over here in England, and they're really open to having these conversations, particularly with teachers, heads of department. They want to find out more about sort of content knowledge and stuff. And I said to them, well, look, when are we going to start to see these changes? Like we all know it. And I said the spec for the exam is just so jam packed. There's so much in there. Like it needs to be less and go with some breadth and depth and allow for that time to happen. And they were like, yeah, no, absolutely, completely agree with you. And I was like, well, when's it going to happen? When are we going to see us change? And they were like, well, it's not up to us. It's up to the DFE. They said it and this, that, the other. And so it constantly feels like everyone is looking to somebody else, like that Spider-Man meme, everyone pointing at each other of like, who's going to make the change? Who's going to start it? And I think that's where a lot of the people I'm talking to, we're like sick of it. And it's like, right, we're going to push from the bottom up and we're going to start making that change. Whether that's at your own subject level, whether that's at a wider education scope as such. And I suppose that's another reason as to why I do a lot of what I do at the moment with AI, with DT, with Inventor Club, is to just start making that change that I want to see. Ben Whitaker said this at a conference I was at a little while ago, was never before has what and how we teach been up for debate with the rise of AI and so on. So it's forcing change, and some people are reticent for that change. Others can't wait for it, and they're pushing for it and they're moving with it. And I think that's what we're sort of starting to see now, is more of a push up from the bottom, and that sort of drum is getting louder and louder, I suppose.
Yeah, I was about to say that you've pretty much answered my question. And it's very much the same here in Australia. There's all the governing bodies and the standardized testing. You know, we're supposed to teach individual programs, we get standardized test the whole school. That's just a mind bend there. But it's one of those things where the more teachers you talk to, it's just like we're not throwing our hands up in the air in regards to what we want to teach the kids, but we're just going, you know what, I'm just going to teach them. I'm going to tick the boxes because they have to be ticked, but I'm going to teach them what I know is going to be helpful for them and what is going to be beneficial for that student in their journey for success. And I think that is going to start driving the powers that be to start actually looking and going, okay, well, yeah, geez, we do need to change.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, the world's different to what it used to be. So I talk a lot about property used to be the cheat code for my parents' generation. That's how you sort of made a fair bit of money. You put it into property, and that's just not the case anymore. That's not a cheat code. It doesn't work for my generation. It certainly doesn't work for kids coming through at the moment, because it's just ridiculous to try and get onto the ladder. Whereas actually entrepreneurism that's their cheat code. It's easier than ever to start a business now with a couple of £100, a laptop and access to the internet. You can start your own gig economy, your own social media content creation business. You could start your own 3D printing business. We've got one of our ex-students, he's absolutely flying at the moment, making keychains. He's making several £1,000s a month, working with companies just to print their logos. Because he's got that skill set and he's learning that business entrepreneur side of it all, of how to market his ideas, get it out there, approach companies and people. And that's a whole different skill set to what necessarily we always teach in schools. And he's trying to figure that out as he goes along.
Yeah, that's I had a student probably 5 years ago. saw a hole in the market here in Australia. The skin cancer capital of the world, pretty much. And he saw a hole in the sunscreen market. There was no vegan branded sunscreens, and there's a lot of people who really take that side of things quite seriously, and understandably so. So he looked into it, did the research, had plenty of support from his parents, and ended up homeschooling because there was some legal requirements that he had to complete school. But he went into business and created a very successful brand of sunscreen. So that entrepreneurial spirit is definitely there, and like you said, it's the way that the younger generation are going to make an impact in this world.
Massively.
So looking at that, and you talk about being a problem solver. You're part of the Inventor Club, or you're co-owner and the specialist for the Inventor Club. So what is that? Like, what do you do? Is it just for the older kids? Is it for younger kids? Are you teaching parents? Like, what are you actually doing in that?
So we've got sort of several things that we do, and we're trying to look at the moment how we reach as wide a market as possible. Inventor Club as such is myself and my business partner, Ben Edmonds. So he started Inventor Club as the club, which happens we currently still run it on Tuesdays, but he started it in his living room because he started home educating his kids. So he is now an ex principal engineer from Dyson. Not recently, a couple of years ago, he left Dyson. And he just, again, wasn't happy with the state of education, what his kids were going through. So he moved them to home ed, and what he was offering for the DT side of it, just got a massive following in the home ed community. And so he had kids showing up every week, and they were sort of doing some problems, they were making stuff, and it grew from there. And so I'd seen his club online on Facebook. So I think we're the only people to actually use social media for how it was intended. Because I just messaged him and I was like, look, this looks awesome what you're doing. I didn't know him from anyone. And I just said, look, it looks cool, because it was in Swindon. Can I come down and have a look? And I started helping out. We got chatting, and before you know it, we realised a lot of our values were in line with each other, and so I kept coming back and helping out with the club, and then that's when we kind of decided to turn it into the company that it is at the moment. So we started it up as a company together. We offer our club still, because that's our ideas breeding ground. We just have these amazing set of kids that come to us in the local area, and we just pose them problems and they build models trying to solve those problems. We don't give a lot of instruction. We don't give a lot of help. It's completely up to them in their creative process, and we chip in with technical bits of knowledge here and there, but a lot of it is open to them. We kind of let them guide where they go with it, and we just have a awesome fun. But what we do is we then take those problems that we sort of tested and checked out with the club, and we start taking that to schools. So we do a lot of teacher training in CPD. We do student workshops now. We're looking at how we can make our own STEM kits as well, of trying to scale this idea of just posing a problem without the instructions, because we're all bred into this way of thinking that the answers are in the back of the book, that there's a right way to do it, that it has to be done step 1, 2, 3, and 4. Whereas most of the time we all know and recognize that we're making it up as we go along. We just like to have confidence that somebody knows what they're doing. And so we assume that everyone else around us has got their shit together, they know what they're doing, and that they got the answers, but we don't. A lot of us don't. And I think the sooner we recognize and realize that, and actually that we'll work together to get to a solution, and you have confidence in your ability to do that, then you're going to be fine. And so that's what we try and do with everything we do, essentially. And that's what we're talking about, is we want to make the problem solvers of the future, whether that's a small daily issue or it's a much larger one that affects the entire planet. If you have trust in your ability to solve that problem and a process of how you go about it, then we'll be all much better off. So we try and find ways to do that, essentially. And whether that's with the club, our training sessions, whether that's with the STEM kits we've got that we're coming out at the moment, or Problem of the Week, which is going to be a free resource that we're going to give away to schools. And that's going to be a 2-page problem literally front and back, and we're going to have 52 of those. And we're just going to give them free to schools. They can run them as clubs, curriculum, whatever you want to do with them. But kind of inspiration where you just get posed the problem and the context, the scenario, and then you build your solution off the back of that.
Hey, that sounds like a blast. That sounds like I can see why it's caught on so much. DT is one of those hard ones for, I guess, for the homeschooling area, because people look at the traditional. Oh, you've got to have a belt sander, you've got to have a drop saw, you've got to have this, you've got to have a welder. Yeah, you've got to have a tremendous amount of kit. Where you're talking about creativity and problem solving, where it sounds like you actually don't need anything more than a little bit of freedom.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think I sort of used to bump my head into it when I was a kid as well. But the more I sort of think about it, because I used to love going down to my granddad's. I used to live down in Bournemouth on the south coast, and he had this huge, great big garage because he had lots of space. And in there was loads of knackered old wood tools, hand tools, and everything they used to sort of collected all over his life. And I loved nothing better than just going into the garage and making stuff, learning what that tool did, what this machine was, and just hacking at stuff. But then I never really knew what to make sometimes. I was still quite young at the time, and I was sort of early, I'd say, well, it must have been, I would do this all the way from like when I was 7 through to like 15, 16. But yeah, I never knew quite what to make and stuff. So my nan would then go, well, I need an egg holder. I need to hold like on the counter, and that was it. That's all she'd tell me, and I would go right. And I'd scurry off into the garage, and that's when I was most productive because I had something to aim towards, and I didn't necessarily need somebody to butt in and tell me, right, this is step 1, that's step 2, this is how you're going to do this and do that, and all the rest of it. I just kind of wanted to make an egg holder and play around, and whether that was garbage, which in this case it was absolute trash. Bits of wood and sticking out and nails everywhere. But I had such a great time doing it, and I still remember it to this day. And I had something I was working towards. I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I was able to figure it out along the way myself, and I picked up a bit of knowledge along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I bet your nan loved it as well.
She did, bless her heart. I think she did actually genuinely keep it for quite a while, but even though she definitely probably shouldn't have done.
So you're talking about you were given just go do this, and I've had that. My dad, when I was growing up, I was lucky enough to have a dad around who would show me how to use tools and teach me stuff and things like that. And I know a lot of young people today don't have that. They don't have the grandfather or the uncle or the dad around. I can't just limit it to the patriarch. So I mean, a lot of they don't have mums and aunties and uncles and grandmas around. They're just sort of left to their own devices, unfortunately. But we've had that opportunity, and I was chucked. We were pulling down this big bird aviary, and I was getting in my dad's hair, and he's thrown a hacksaw at me and some metal pipe and said, "Cut this up, would you?" And I had no idea, and I just picked it up, and I guess I'd watched him enough times and started hacking up this metal pipe, and off I went. And that was sort of my entree into metalwork. So yeah, there's that. I didn't know what I was doing, but I know I had to do something. So yeah, off I went. So, and he was thankfully he was quite impressed with me, and I didn't break any blades. So
see, that's the thing. More sticks than we realise. As humans, we're quite intuitive of watching, of monkey see, monkey do, and so we pick up things without realising. I think as teachers, we want learning to be more explicit, and that we must see it, we must be able to prove it, and that we have this. So again, I'm a big fan of the hidden curriculum, where there is how kids interact, the social side of it, the clubs they go to and join, why do they pick the subjects that they do, what are those unwritten rules of lunchtime where you're allowed to go and you're not, that they come up with amongst themselves. There's a whole hierarchy going on underneath what we as teachers will see and notice. Sometimes we do, sometimes we see some of that, but a lot of the time we don't. If you think back to your own childhood, there were rules, there were groups, there was cliques, there was all this hidden stuff that was just accepted by everyone, you knew and understood, and so you pick and learn a lot of that up from school. And so again, you only get that by providing and facilitating that area. You can't dictate who the cool kids are going to be, where the hot spots are going to be, and all this jazz. It just happens naturally, and you do that through, like I said, facilitation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, there's just unwritten rules, and I mean, I remember making up games. I've been watching these. Currently at the school I'm at, there's the year 7 students. They've come up with this particular game of the way they're playing tag or tip or whatever it is. I've got no understanding of the rules, but they every morning tea and lunch, they're having a blast out there doing it, and no one gets cranky. The rules were just, all of a sudden they just started playing it, and the rules were there, and it's just yeah. So it's amazing how intuitive kids can be when they have that ability to I think boredom to a point drives creativity, because you have to think about it. Like, what am I going to do with myself? Well, I can't. Phones aren't allowed at school. I don't want to read a book. I don't want to sit in the library. I've got mates around, and so they just work something out. So, in line with that, how would you describe or explain creativity to someone, or to a young person, or a parent of a young person?
That's a great question, and we spend a lot of time talking about it. To be fair, because we hear all the time, "Oh, I'm not creative. Oh, I can't draw. Oh, I don't know. I'm not going to be very good at this, and I don't have good ideas." And lots of different variations and so on. And the first thing is to, one, stop saying that. Stop telling yourself it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, for one. And two, creativity is your flair, and that's what we kind of attribute it to. Is it's your way of doing things and going about things. We are all creative in our own ways. For instance, I am not a big music guy. I'm not that into music. I love songs. I love having it on in the background. I cannot for the life of me remember song names, titles, bands, albums. I'm in awe of people who can, and that can put playlists together. But that's just something they're very good at, and I'm not. And I know that. So I don't dip into that as much, because I know my skill and my creativity, how I go about things, my process is more robust in art and drawing and making and building. That's where my experience flourishes, and so that's where I'm allowed to feel a bit more creative and experiment with it. Now, if I really apply myself, I could sit down and I can work that process out. So creativity can be trained. I could sit there with GarageBand and I could work on some drums, boom boom boom, and I can add some melody in and so on. So I can build and learn to be more creative if you want to. So if you sit there and tell yourself, "Oh no, I can't," then you're not going to try, you're not going to do it. And so that's where your flair comes into it, of the little bit on top. That's that 10-20%. A lot of it is skills and learning how to draw, where to put the line. That's all art is knowing where to put the line, how hard to press, and what color to put next to the other. It's all theory. It's knowledge. So that's the 80%, but that 20%, that's the flair. That's what you bring, and that's your process and how you go about things. And so if you're not given the opportunity to do it, then you're not going to grow that. You're not going to grow your knowledge and your understanding. So Canva recently have just bought Affinity. So I'm really pushing hard now to learn digital art and Illustrator and their version of it, which is Affinity Designer. And so I'm spending a lot of time just slowly trying to draw really basic shapes and so on. But actually now I'm starting to piece them together and make drop shadows and vectorize images and so on. I did one recently of our dog, just because I wanted to learn and be creative. That's what I had as inspiration there at the time. It was a picture that I took on my phone of my dog, dropped it into Designer, and then I started putting basic shapes over it. And if you look into it, there's people that can do amazing things there. And I could get really down heart, beat up and say, "Oh, I can't do it." Or actually I can persevere a little bit, just put some practice in till I get to that point where I can start putting my own 20% flair on it. And that's when it becomes real open and creative and enjoyable. So I'd say, yeah, it's about that. Just that focus on that 20%, what you can do, build up your skills and knowledge, and do it for enjoyment. That's the other thing. Creativity is enjoyable. It should be fun. So don't beat yourself up when it's not a work of art, when it's not this. And if you want to hang it on your fridge, it's your bloody fridge. Hang it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've on that, like I heard someone, I can't remember who it was, but they were talking about, they were talking about creating something, like, and it was just like, everyone says quality over quantity, and he goes, that's true. He goes, but you can't get to the quality until you've gone through the quantity.
Mm.
So by the sounds of it, with what you're doing with the Inventor Club and in your DT classrooms, you're creating that environment where the your students are in a space that's safe enough for them to fail and fail forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something we talk about a lot is getting over that fear of failure, because that's what puts people back a lot. Is we're just too scared to try, or actually we don't want others to see, and so on. So you have to make that environment conducive to that of it's okay. So a prime example, we used to put paper when we would do workshops out, and we would ask them to sketch their ideas, put them down, and we'd have a couple of sketches or drawings or whatever on there, but it wasn't really a lot, and they weren't getting their ideas down and physically on paper and sharing them. We switched over to whiteboards, and instantly people were happy to scrawl all over it. I mean, I had 10, 20 ideas down on this whiteboard, and it's because it wasn't permanent. We actually noticed this, and we started speaking to people, and they were like, yeah, it doesn't matter, it's a whiteboard. I've got this chunky, great big whiteboard pen. I can't be that great with it. Everyone knows it's not going to look that good. So they were fine. They understood this pressure had gone of trying to make it look good. And now they were able just to go back to basics of scrawling and drawing and scribbling and actually trying to get that message and communication across. And instantly we found that process was 10 times better, because they were able to share ideas. If we didn't like it, it was easy to erase and rub off. And so they were able to be a bit more open and creative with it, and it didn't matter if it went wrong. And that's what we try and get across, is it doesn't matter. That's why we use cardboard, and why we use lollipop sticks, and we use cheap, easy materials that it doesn't matter, that are easy to, one, work with and quick, and two, they're cheap. If you can throw away and it doesn't matter, it's not a problem. You don't have to spend millions of pounds and hundreds of pounds on wood and finishes and sandpaper. You just have these easily accessible materials that can be thrown away, start again, or you can catch back up within 20 minutes to where you were if you wanted to start again. I mean, how many times in a DT lesson has a student come up to you and gone, oh, I've messed it up, can I start again? And you've only got so many bits of wood cut already, and it's going to take another 2 lessons for them to catch up. With cardboard, you don't have that. Yeah, of course you can. Here's another sheet. Away you go. Not a problem. And then that process, they've learned from it. They've gone through that iterative cycle of, well, I slipped at this point, or I wasn't holding my knife properly there, and so on. And that's why that curve, that cut wasn't quite right. So actually, I want to start again so I can get it right. And they've gone through that experience and that process, and they're not scared to get it wrong. And that's what we preach massively through what we do.
Yeah, it's a great way to look at it, where you're giving them the freedom in the materials and the resources to relax them. It's just like, yeah, well, it's only cardboard. It's only, it's a marker. It's a Stanley knife, not a bandsaw. So, do you find that the kids then become that, or they overcome their fear and become more creative, and they take greater risks in their design work?
Yeah, massively. So a prime example of that, we used to do passive speakers, which I know across the UK lots of people do. And it's a great project, really good for skills, and you get to use certain bits of machinery, and as a skill builder is great. But they end up looking around the same. So you just end up laminating plywood together, chipboard, whatever material you've got, but you end up then cutting shapes, laminating, gluing together, and they end up being rectangle. Or square, and they end up having varying size holes, and that's kind of the only difference to it. Whereas I've done that project for a couple of years, and then I started going, right, do you know what, I'm going to hand over 2 lessons to cardboard modeling, and we're actually going to sketch, we're going to come up with ideas, then we're going to put it together, and we'll start looking at how we can do that in and physically bring it to life a little bit. After that point, I started getting crazy ideas. It was the first time I ever had a cylinder one. So because it was able to do it quickly in cardboard, he cut the circles out dead quick, glued them all together. He saw it as a cylinder and was like, oh, that looks like a Coke can. And he was like, I'm going to make it look like a Coke can. And that's what he did. And it was the first time. And without adding that step in, I don't think we would have got there, because he would have been limited by the material. It's easier just to quickly cut that square, cut that rectangle, and then round the corners over a little bit, and then I'm done. Great, because I hate sanding. So he was limited by the material. But now all of a sudden we took those limitations away a little bit at the start, and then they were able to open their minds up. We started getting heart shapes from some of the girls, butterfly shapes, which actually had some really intricate curves in, and was something they might not have done beforehand. But because they were able to bring it to life and see what it would look like, they were then like, right, I want to see what that looks like in wood and do it for real. So that's what it is. It's a representation you're modeling, and it's standard practice in industry. Before you spend millions of pounds developing a product, you're going to model it and look at different variations of it first, in foam, in clay, in whatever material it is that costs you pennies.
Yeah, so you're giving them that real world experience in a fun, in a safe, and in a way that they can digest. And for some, I guess it might even ignite a passion in them to go through a design path or an architectural or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and that's it. And it's with DT, there's so many different pathways, whether you want to be an engineer, whether you want to be a product designer, you want to be an artist, you want to be a digital graphic designer. And so there's so many different elements of a suit maker. It's just, there's so much, and you can't teach and always get that across. And so what you're trying to do is just expose them to all these different elements of materials, processes, ways of manufacturing. And for us, it comes down to problem solving of how you can do that, whether that is a certain stitch within textiles, or how are you going to get over this issue in an engineering scenario. It's all the same process of how you go back to drawing board, rely on your knowledge, your skills, and how are you going to overcome that issue and that problem, no matter what career you decide to go into. I mean, even within the big businesses of strategy, they still use design thinking as a way to overcome their problems. So it's something that's completely applicable to everything, and it's what we talk about, we teach, and we try and get that idea across, that it's okay to experiment, to iterate, and to fail. So you want to fail as quick as possible and then move on to the right solution.
Yeah, you just mentioned design thinking, and you talked about iteration and moving forward and evaluation of that project. But do you with your Inventor Club, do you talk about empathy? Because I know more recently, and you've probably seen it as well, that design thinking is back in vogue. Now, as DT teachers, we've always done it. We've always looked at the human side of things. But do you, I guess, explicitly mention empathy in that process when you're talking with the kids, or does it just come naturally to them?
No, it doesn't come. It doesn't come natural to kids at all, and I think that's something we have to understand as adults, and that's well documented in research as well. We do explicitly teach it, and we teach it in design of how somebody else experiences things, whether that is an elderly person, whether that's disabled, whether that's just a younger child, and so on. So because children are developing that part of their brain, they're not able to think externally yet, and when they're teenagers, their brains are going haywire, and they're thinking about lots of other stuff, and they're not thinking about how other people feel. So it's even harder. But there's to sort of prove it, the Smarty experiment. And I think this is from back in the 60s or something. They sat down with toddlers, young children of different ages from 5 upwards, and they gave them a tube of Smarties, like the old school tube, and they were like, what do you think's in there? And they were like, well, Smarties. And they were like, well, have a look. So they opened it up and pulled out fell a crayon, and then they were like, oh wow, crayon and Smarties. And then they would say to them, right, if we give that tube to Jack over there, what do you think he would say is in the tube? And then they would say, a crayon. Because they can't understand Jack's point of view, that he would think what they thought, that it would be Smarties and so on, because that process hadn't been developed yet. Those synapses, those pathways weren't there. And so when we understand that, it's so easy to understand kids' behavior, in that when they were like, oh, I didn't mean it, this, that, the other, and they're giving you this because they've said that to so-and-so, and because they generally weren't thinking about how they felt. And their brains aren't wired the way that we expect or would like them to be just yet. I genuinely believe this. I don't think, and this isn't research backed, but I don't think boys really mature well into their 20s, early 20s, because they're still experimenting. They're still seeing how they can react with their friends. They're like gorillas. This reptile brain is just constant, like, "Ooh, boys, men." They've got to go through that experience, and then they can understand how a female would feel in that situation, how a young child would feel, how their dad and parents would feel, and so on. We need a chance to go through that experience. So when you say to a kid, right, we're going to make can openers, but we're going to have old age pensioners in mind, they don't understand their grip strength isn't there, because they've only ever known their grip strength until you give them an experience of what that might be like. So there are ways of, with for instance, the glasses that restrict your vision and so on. So how you can then start to talk about user design and how people with blurred vision will experience certain apps and screens and reading books and so on. I think is a really good one if you want to try and experience asthma, is to put a straw in your mouth and just run 100 meters, just jog 100 meters, breathing only through a straw, and see how far you get, because it's just horrendous. Trying to then do physical activity within that restraint. So you can really struggle to empathize with people if you haven't had that experience. And so we do that. We bring up different scenarios, different areas where we would talk through what that is. And sometimes we can get them to experience it with situations like that. We can manipulate it. Other times we just talk it through and we just say, right, well, think about this person, put yourself in their shoes, and really try and develop that knowledge of a different scenario for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I reckon if I put a straw in my mouth, I'd take the straw out and I still can't run 100 meters. But but yeah, and that's one of the things that I found as well, that the empathy is not there in the kids. They just don't understand it. I mean, it's, I know that there's the science where the brain, the frontal cortex hasn't formed properly or joined up. I'm not getting into the science of it, but I've taught boys for, I taught in single sex boys schools for sort of better part of 15 years, and a perfectly reasonable answer when they did something. And I used to tell them, it's like, why'd you do that? I don't know. And it's like, well, that's a perfectly reasonable answer because you had no idea of the consequence to your action. And if we can bring that into the classroom of going, okay, let's just take those glasses off and have a look through these ones just for a fraction of a second, you might get that insight. Like, I love teaching design. I love throwing those curveballs at the kids where, oh, think about this. I'll definitely have to try that straw one. That's for sure. So we've talked about creativity. We've talked about human creativity, a bit of empathy. The big thing now is AI, and the talk is it's gonna. Well, some people say it'll either stifle creativity or it's gonna just accelerate creativity. How much do you place value on that? And like, is it just a tool for creativity or is it the tool for creativity?
Great question. And this is where it's sort of dangerous, is particularly in this creativity space, because whether it's a tool or the tool is still to be determined. And what we have to understand is that the way AI works is on its training, and that training has come from humans. So when Hollywood is up in arms about using their content, when again, graphic designers get really upset because Adobe are now saying that we are going to train anything you make with Adobe or any of their software they will use to train their AI model. You're giving your work away. You would never do that normally. And so you are giving it to these tech companies to then train their models on. So I see that side of it. And it is absolutely something that has to get worked out. And it's a real complex situation, particularly when you start getting legal into it, politics behind it, and all the rest of it. However, for the layman and how it can make them more creative, it's going to skyrocket your creativity. It's going to allow you to do things you've never been able to do before, like sort of any real advancement in tech. So again, like I was talking about learning Illustrator, that's difficult. It's an industry standard piece of software. And if you don't have that skill and that understanding, it's really difficult. But actually now you've got something that can make images for you just by sounding it out, giving the words, I want a picture that looks like this, bang, there's that picture in that style. So of course you're going to be more creative. And I think that's where we have to understand it, that it's going to help and boost a lot of people's if you are able to build it into your process and you're able to understand how it works. And we can make things more creative, and you can do that with the words side of it as well, and talk with ChatGPT to actually brainstorm, sound some ideas out. I actually think Gemini from Google is more creative, so that's always a good one for brainstorming ideas. Just talking back and forth, get it to ask you questions, and it will open up ideas that you've never done before. We all look for inspiration on stuff. It's just somewhere else to gain inspiration from. The way I always talk about it is you have an expert at your disposal now. Before, we'd always go and ask your friend they've got a bit of experience in it, or my mate's a mechanic or something. I'll ask him what he thinks about this and that. And so they come at it from a different point of view, but their knowledge of whatever you want is limited. Whereas with AI, because it's trained on billions of pieces of information, it's an expert in a lot of stuff. So you can ask it to work and think as a certain person. So whether that be business, whether that be in art and creativity, it's going to be able to act and assume that role and bounce ideas off for you, and it's going to be able to give stuff. And I think as soon as we realize that, we start using it as a co-pilot, as Microsoft call it, as somebody to work with alongside, then yes, your creativity is just going to bloom and multiply massively, because it's going to be able to do some of that harder technical stuff that you just weren't able to before.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I use it regularly, if not every day, not multiple times a day, for a whole range of things. It gets me past that blank page, brain freeze type of thing. It's the colleague, that you can ask 1,000 questions to, and they never get bored and they never walk away, and they're happy to give you an answer. But do you find as well that we know with design thinking is a key word there. We've talked about creativity, and we've got the creative thinking side of things sort of sorted. When we're looking at AI, I mean, you and I, as teachers, we've got that life experience. We're a little bit older. We've seen, we've heard, we've experienced life in a different way. Do you think that gives us an advantage with AI in the ability to actually critically analyze what it's feeding back? Because we know it's getting better, but there's still those hallucinations, or it's just downright wrong, where we should those things where we should put glue on our pizzas to make the cheese stick and eat a rock a day, and so it's still spitting things like that out. So how do we teach our students in the design and just in the design sphere to critically analyze or critically think about those things?
Well, it's like you said, it's treat it in that way, that it's not doing it for you, it's working with you. So I know that Darren Coxon you've had on before, he talks about it, that he will never put AI in front of him. It's not in between him and somebody else or what he's trying to complete. It's always next to him. And I think that's a great way of looking at it, is that it's there along for the ride to help guide you and spur you on. And that's what we need to get our kids to understand, is it's not gospel. It's the same. It's not really that different to looking something up on Wikipedia. You have to take it with a pinch of salt. You have to do your research, look around it, fact check. So we have to understand that certain tasks might not require AI at all. Leon Furs talks a lot about his level of involvement, and so what percentage of AI you would use for what tasks. So you can use 80% of this task can be done by AI, because it's just simple recall and fact checking and pulling stuff together. And then I'm going to read through it. I'm going to be the judge. So you've posted stuff to me, and then I'm going to check that. So again, there's no point me going through and reading this whole massive 80-page document when I can get it distilled by AI to the section in the stuff that I want. If I get that prompt right, it's going to pull out the sections I'm looking for, and then now I can be more critical. So I've actually saved a lot of time, and I can focus that into my creativity and my design. And so that's where it's going to help and it's going to boost, is just building that good practice. And it's going to be difficult building it in kids at the moment because they're going to have their way of wanting to work with it. We're still, as educators, as users of AI as well, because again, AI has been around for a long time. It's only really been publicly available the past couple of years. And that's what people are getting to grips with, is how we use it as a society, as a community, and how we work together. So, but that genie is well out the bottle. And that's what we've got to learn ourselves, and how we then get kids to use it. Because I know lots of people talk about it. It's the new social media. We don't want to fall behind, let these kids get ahead of us and so on. So we need to be looking at what good, sensible use is, and to work that out together, because this generation is different. They don't want to be told in the ways that it used to work and everything else, and the hierarchies are different. They want to work with and collaboratively in their teams and with people, so they want to work that process out together. Why can't I? Why shouldn't I use AI? And a lot of people who are using AI daily in the classroom, you'll find that kids are treating it, they're calling it boomer technology. They're not as excited about it as we are. They're not. So when you're trying to force it down them and you're really worried that they're going to be doing this, that, and the other, a lot of the time they don't want to use it for certain things. So I don't think it's as dangerous as we are foreseeing, in that we are trying to think of the worst case, worst scenarios all the time. However, we do have to come up with agreements of how we're going to use that and use it sensibly, whether that is for image creation, whether it's for text generation, and how you're going to put that into your system. Again, I think it's honesty. It's just being open and honest. I've used AI here. I've used that there. That's AI. That's the 20% I got for inspiration, but this 80%, that's all me. And I think that's what we need to teach kids, is where that line lies and how you move that slider up and down depending on what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with just it's there, it's a tool, and like I've had discussions. He's like, no, I'm not going to use it. No, it's doesn't give me what I need anyway. So I can find stuff out. But then, like I had one student go, so I really want to use AI to help me put ideas down for my project. I said, well, absolutely use it. Use this one because we've got to look at boundaries within schools and things like that. I said, but just tell me that you've used it. Just give me your prompt, give me the date you used it, and tell me what platform you used. And he's like, oh, okay, no worries. So I can, and as soon as I gave him permission, he was like, great, and wasn't trying to hide it. And then the other classmates go, so can I use it for this? Yeah, sure. Just tell me that you've used it. Show me how you've done it. Show me how you elicited the response. So, and I think that's critical.
Yeah, massively. And the thing is, the tools of today are not going to be the tools of tomorrow either. It's going to get smarter, better. So literally yesterday, Meta released Llama 3.1, I think it is now. And it's rivaling, this is the first open source to rival ChatGPT 4.0 and Anthropic. And so it's constantly growing more and more. And so the tools that are available at the moment are not going to be the tools we use tomorrow, because they're going to be even better. They're going to be more advanced and so on. So that we'll be learning how to use what we've got at the moment. And without knowing it, we've been overjumped. Developers have come out with something else the next day. So yeah, it's an ongoing rapid journey at the minute. And that's where you can only just try and keep up with your little bit of it. So that's what I focus on, is how is that affecting education? I used to try and keep up with everything of what was going on, and it's not possible. So I try and do what I can with what's going to affect me, DT, education as a whole, and teachers. And that's more than enough to kind of grapple with at the moment.
Oh, 100%. Like, I know, like, with this current iteration of AI and, generative AI as such, it's just, you can't hold on to anything tight. It's like, it's like trying to hold on to water. It's just changing so quickly, and there's things pop up, and then things disappear just as quickly as they pop up, and then they change. And, it's one of those things that I think we definitely need to be aware of. We need to make students aware of it. But yeah, it's funny. Boomer technology. I've never, I've not had that one yet, but yeah, I look forward to hearing that one. Yeah, because kids hold on to things differently, don't they?
Yeah, they do, and I'd seen it. So I hadn't had a kid say that to me. I saw someone else use that term, and I just loved it so much, so I call it that from now on. But I have had kids just say to me, "But I'm not interested." Like I said, it's more for you, and that's what they said. They went, "It's more for you, sir. Like you love it. I can tell that. Like crack on." And that's what I do, and I use it for everything. But I just think again, they're kids. They want to do homework as quick as possible so they can get back out with their mates. And if you look at it that way, then yeah, they're more likely to cut corners than I am, who's someone who's trying to make some really top quality resources and materials for my students and my kids. And I'm trying to wring the most out that I can out of AI. Whereas there's going to be people out there who are just looking for a quick fix. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's their use case for it. That's what they want it for. So again, I see a lot of people talking about, I want AI to do my dishes so I can go and do the poetry and the writing, not the other way
Yeah.
around. And that's what we're seeing people doing. So yeah, I mean, I've always said it, always trust a lazy man. A lazy man will always find the easiest way to do something. They'll cut your process time in half because they will question what needs to actually be there and be done. And that's what people are doing with AI. They're starting to cut their processes down. So yeah, we're just trying to find a way of how we can all do that sustainably as well. That's another question to bring into it, of how much energy is being used by these servers to actually create all of this. And so the amount of water has been used daily is just insane. I don't think that's going to be sustainable or feasible as well. So there's another element there to it. And we're talking about regulation and so on. So there's just so much to come with it. At the moment, it's just Wild West territory. It's getting better. But like I said, I think it's one of those where it scares a lot of people. I don't want to dig into the details of it, and that's fine. And even I don't. I'm not an expert in this at all. I'm someone who uses it daily, someone who is sort of ahead of your average person with it. But like I said, that's what I'm trying to do, is get that understanding, get a shared understanding, and get a certain level of competency with it, and just understand it and look at it as another digital tool of what's going to be standard in our future. So it's not something to be scared of or run away from.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those. It's a new tool for Arsenal. We just have to learn how to use it safely. And yeah, sustainability is a massive thing. And I mean, as a design teacher, we focus on that a lot throughout, like the whole. I mean, I do high school, so we touch on that for everything. And me as a, I guess, just as a person who wants this world to last a little bit longer, we got to look at how we use our resources. And if we can pass it on to the kids, and they're going to go, well, you made that problem, you should try and fix it. So, put that onus back on us as well. So, hey, look, I mean, we could probably talk for another hour on this. But
Literally, do cut me off, because otherwise I will and can do. I've been known
no,
to
and look,
keep going.
I do the same. I'll do the exact same thing as well, and that's what I love about these conversations, because we can get into so much stuff, and I guess the more we talk, the more questions we have, and the more questions that we'll get. I mean, I don't think there's ever enough answers, but at least we're asking the questions. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
So, speaking of questions, before we wrap up, I always like to finish off with just a little bit, just the last few little questions, just so that the listeners get to know who Aaron is, just as another person. So, and this is always a fun one, because the few questions are, here we go. What's the first one, rapid fire? And I know you like your rapid fire questions, so listening to Control Alt Teach.
We do. Yeah, we love
When's
doing
the
that
next
now.
episode coming
out? Soon. Literally, we're recording the second episode, and with our first guest, with Trudy Barrow, another DT teacher as well, but she's big in the AI space as well. So that's going to be a great conversation, and that'll be hopefully coming out early next week. No, 2 weeks. 2 weeks. It'll be out in 2 weeks.
I look forward to that one. I've been trying to catch up with Trudy for a long time, so she's been a very busy lady for sure. So
yeah, no, she is, and really, like I said, inspirational in what she's done and how she's going about it. So yeah, really looking forward to that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first rapid fire question for you today is, what's your favorite drink?
It's coffee.
Coffee.
Love a good coffee. I literally cannot get through the day without a minimum 4 coffees.
So is it long black, short, flat white, macchiato? How do you have it?
No, I tell you what, I drink mainly instant, and I'll have a nice one in the evening. So literally, and this is how indoctrinated I am as a teacher. I can tell you it's minimum 4, because it'll be 1 in the morning, 1 at break, 1 at lunch, and then 1 when I get home, and then that's me golden. I know it fits perfectly in the timetable.
Oh, 100%, 100%. For our listeners out there, what's a challenge you'd like to pose to them?
A challenge is
Yeah,
to draw more, make music, make poetry, whatever interests you, do more of it, and find time, book it in. So when we talk about being creative, solving problems, and all that jazz, it comes from knowledge and skills. And you'll only ever be ready to take on that problem if you do the practice as you go along. So build it into your daily routine. Sketch, make, sing, whatever it takes your interest, takes your fancy, do it more.
brilliant, brilliant. Do you have a favorite quote or mantra that has resonated with you over the years?
Oh, I've got several. Um, Trying to pin it down would be tricky, because it's a harsh one, and I've reworded it. My old man always used to tell me when I was younger, if you treat everyone like an idiot, you won't go far wrong. And I distilled the message behind it of actually understanding people and looking to understand and have that empathy of where they come from. You can't go far wrong. So I've sort of changed that one, and it's been a big one for me of how I've interacted with people, but not quite how he said it.
Yeah, nah, 100% get it. Yeah, sounds like our fathers weren't too different. So. Hey, and it wouldn't be the Tattooed Teacher podcast without asking you if you have any tattoos.
Oh, I knew he was going to ask this. I have one, and it's half a tattoo, and it's on my ankle, and it's a homemade one that was done on my 18th birthday, late that night. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily call it a tattoo, but I have a mark.
Oh, hey, and last but definitely not least, and I'll put these in the show notes as well. If people want to find out more about you, more about the Inventor Club, more about some of the things that you do, where's the best place to find you?
Best places on LinkedIn. So Aaron Patching on LinkedIn, and also my business partner, Ben Edmonds. But we're on Inventor Club, everything on Facebook, on Insta. We're going to start TikTok soon as well, just once we can get the videos going. But there's our website as well, inventorclub.co.uk. So everything we sort of do is within that branding, and is well available and out there. So yeah, but mostly active on LinkedIn.
All right, brilliant. Yeah, I'll put all that in the show notes. I've actually learned how to do all that now, so I'm pretty happy with that. So.
Well, you're one ahead of me. I can't even get onto Apple Podcasts at the moment because our picture's wrong. I've got to sort the artwork out. So yeah, you're well ahead.
Mate, you'll get there. It takes a while. It has been a journey, that's for sure. It's. I've learned a lot, and I'm getting to speak to some amazing people, which is fantastic.
Yeah. No,
But
thank you so much for having me. Genuinely, it's been a blast.
mate, I was just about to say thank you so much for your time, for your insights, and for all you're doing for the design world for the young people moving through, because it's a subject that unfortunately is getting harder and harder to teach because there's less and less design teachers out there. So keep doing what you're doing. I appreciate it, and I'm sure your students do as well.
Oh, thank you very much. Generally, it's something I love doing. So it's easy when you love it, but I love talking about it as well. So the more opportunities to get like this, I can't say no. So thank you so much for having me on.
No worries, Aaron. You have a wonderful day. Enjoy your summer, and we'll talk again soon.
You too, bud. Take care. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to the Tattooed Teacher podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it insightful. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your network. Special thanks to DJ Fruit Salad for the music. You can find more of his work on Instagram at DJ Fruit Salad Official. Thanks again for listening, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Stay cool, be blessed.